everyone can see the slides that we've got coming up?
You can.
So Alex, do you want to just do the first couple of slides and introduce?
Yeah, no problem. So a little bit about our group. So we are part of the GB Global and Uniserve group of businesses. So Uniserve started or was established in 1984, so just nearly 42 years ago. It started with one person who grew the business from a porter cabin and getting a desk out of a skip to what it is today, where we turn over 1.8 billion as a company. And under that group, there's a lot of fantastic businesses. So Supply Chain Academy is one of those businesses. But as you can see on the slide, there are quite a few different elements. And what's unique about our business is that we don't just cover, the different modes of transport. There are, other fantastic businesses such as that specialize in sustainability or shipping lines and shipping services as well. But for more information on all of those areas, at the end of the slides, there are some links which you are more than welcome to click on or review at your leisure. Over to you, Jamie.
Thank you. So today's a session, the first session of 3 sessions we're looking to put forward over the coming months. So they will all stand alone, so you don't have to attend number 1 to attend number 3. So share this with your colleagues, as Alex mentioned before, and hopefully you can join us and learn as we go through the sessions. So today we're going to talk about discovering business at the advantage of really harnessing your supply chain. In session number 2, we're going to specifically dig into looking at your planning and the optimization within your supply chain. And the third one, we'll look at warehouse management and technology and things like that. I think there is an opportunity for the audience today to feed into those sessions if you want. So if there are some specifics that come through, as Alex mentioned, raise a question within in the chat function, and we can also look to incorporate that into those presentations if it's relevant, that's with the subject that we're kind of talking through. Alex has talked about the group. He's talked about how Ian started the business, and the Supply Chain Academy specifically is a division within the Uniserve group, established in 2012. And Ian really looked at the industry and said, right, well, who is leading training within supply chain division, the supply chain function within businesses? And have we got somebody who actually looks at it from feet on the street in terms of doing those roles and helping support and training those businesses out there? Now, whether that's a large corporate international business or whether it's a smaller SME business. And we identified that there wasn't. So Ian took it upon himself to create Supply Chain Academy. And we've been going for the last sort of 14 years, 13, 14 years, delivering expertise through consultancy, through webinars, through in-house training of businesses to try and support and harness their supply chain opportunities. As Alex mentioned at the end of the presentation today, we'll talk about how we can specifically help you and support you in terms of arming your workforce and upgrading your workforce and supporting your workforce, because the supply chain really is developing at a rapid rate at this moment in time, which we'll talk about in the next few slides. Now, some really key focus areas for supply chain. And supply chain, I guess, doing a bit of a history lesson, sort of first started to come onto organizations' radar sort of in the 1970s, 1980s, but really towards the 1990s, it really sort of pushed forward in terms of having real value that sits within the business. Now, depending on the size of that organization, depends on the emphasis that sits within supply chain, or whether there's some specific supply chain director roles, for example. Obviously, a few years ago, we went through the difficult times, which was Brexit, but also the COVID-19 situation. And through those situations, we really identified weaknesses within supply chains. So I wouldn't say supply chain got sexy, but supply chain really came up in terms of profile within organizations, and businesses really said we need to kind of understand more about our supply chains and maximize our supply chains, and most importantly, secure our supply chains moving forward. So the kind of key focus areas that we wanted to have a look at within supply chain are these areas here. So we've got, just going across the top of the screen there, strategic alignment and leadership, and we're going to dip into that in a bit more detail in the next few slides. Look at customer centricity, data-driven decision making, resilience and risk, collaboration across all functions, sustainability as a business driver, massive thing that's coming down the line now that businesses need to engage with, talent and skills, which we'll touch on a little bit later on today, and also innovation and technology. Supply chain is one area where we can really invest heavily in innovation technology to really see significant gains within our businesses. But the 5 areas that we're going to have a look at this afternoon is we're going to talk about strategic alignment, data-driven decision-making, resilience and risk, talent and skills, and innovation technology. Why those 5 particular areas? Because I think these are the key ones that any size organization can take forward. So whether you are a relatively small SME or whether you're a large corporate businesses, these are 5 areas that you can affect pretty much immediately with making some small changes within your organization. Okay, so let's talk about supply chain alignment, strategies, and business goals. Now, I've got a couple of slides which are going to take us through each of these sections. Some of them are a little bit more wordy than others, such as this one, but hopefully you'll get the idea, and I'll talk around those particular points. But as we've talked about before, if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat and we can pick them up towards the end of today's section. So first of all, what's really, really important, I mentioned about supply chain and the profile of supply chain really rising up in the last few years, and understanding the potential that sits within supply chain and the massive advantages it can give when you've got a lean supply chain that is working for your organization. So first and foremost, what we see in organizations is very much a siloed mentality. Those successful businesses are those that has great collaboration and great communication within your businesses. And fundamentally, you've got sales, operations, and finance working together. So typically you'll hear about S&OP, so sales and operational planning that happens, but actually you need to make sure that you've got your supply chain as a strategy that sits across the whole of your organization. And what that should do is it should help from a forecasting and pre-planning point of view, but also looking at the actual execution and using it on a daily basis with operations to make sure that you're constantly reviewing and making sure it's delivering against the strategy that you actually put in place as a business. So that strategy can be looking at further ahead, so you can be looking at the next 5 or 10 years within your organization. But what you also need to be looking at is actually what's happening on that day-to-day basis. So typically when you're business planning, you will have your objectives there for your year to say, this is what we're looking to do, these are the targets that we're looking to hit. It's important to make sure that the supply chain weaves into that as it affects every part of your business. Why do we do what we do? We're making sure that obviously we're making profit, but we're making sure that we keep our customers happy. So whether we're a manufacturing business, whether we're more of a service-based business, we're making sure that we are delivering on those needs of the customer. So we are plugged in to what our customer needs. So we have a belief what they need, and then we can actually deliver on what that is. And a key element to that is making sure that we've got metrics. We've got KPIs that actually deliver against those. So the KPIs keep us honest. They keep us operating to a certain level that we need to make sure that we deliver as expected internally from our customers, but also externally as our end user customers. So we could be an organization operating across multiple sites. We could be operating across multiple countries even. We need to make sure that we are delivering as where we're promising. So we set our KPI in the sand. It isn't to say that's where we hope to get to. That is where we're getting to. So we can set that up and then we can monitor that as time goes on. And those sorts of things can be around, as it says on the slide there, delivery speed, order accuracy, hitting those lead times that you need to, around quality levels, all that kind of stuff. But also what's important to make sure you've got your customer feedback loops coming back, again, internally or externally, to make sure that you're getting feedback on how you're performing. And if you need to tweak and change, you tweak and change your operations to make sure you can maintain or over exceed what those KPIs are. Now, all organizations, particularly within supply chain, we need to have that agility and flexibility. And I'd like to think that the type of individuals that work within supply chain are constantly looking to be as proactive as they possibly can. Yes, at times we have to be reactive. Problems occur when we're dealing with geopolitical issues, when we're dealing with transport, mechanics that can break down, and also people. We realize that we do have to be reactive around what we're doing. But where we can be, let's be proactive and let's be flexible where we possibly can. And use the tools around us to help us in that journey. We're going to dig into that a little bit more because there's loads of digital tools that we can harness and access. And again, I'll reiterate, whether you're a small business or a larger business, those tools are available to you. They can be cost prohibitive in certain situations, but use them if you can possibly use them within your organization. Another thing is working as an organization and making sure that each part of the organization is aligned in terms of what you're achieving. So yes, at the beginning of the year, you come up with your strategy plan for the year, but making sure you've got those regular check-in points of all levels within your organization. So whether it's the board of directors or whether it's the first line management team, they are connected and they are working together to make sure that they are achieving the priorities of the business. So you're very much aligned, very transparent in terms of what you're trying to achieve. Now, I mentioned one of the first on the opening slides there around sustainability and ethical sourcing, a key function moving forward, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's right for any business and it's right to look after the planet. But actually what you'll find is that you get greater buy-in from your employees, you get greater buy-in from your customers, and also greater buy-in from your suppliers. And as a net result of that, you will then, by effectively popping the bonnet of your organization and looking at that whole sustainability and ethical sourcing, is you can actually make some real benefits and savings and make a difference to people that sit within your supply chain and within your ecosystem. So a really, really important way of looking at how your strategies can help with your business goals, which as a result of a net positive result. So I've got 3 examples here I'd like to talk through. So the first one is Zara. And Zara really had a look at their alignment to make sure that they could maximize speed to market. So they actually had speed to market as one of their strategies. So how can we reduce stuff in terms of those timelines? So their business goal was, well, they work in fast fashion, and they wanted to make sure that they could have a quick response time to trends. So I'm not a fashionista in any way, shape or form. However, now and again, I do have to go out and buy some clothes. And what you want to do is make sure you've got the latest trends. So as an organization, you are looking at the market, looking at what your customers need, looking at the catwalk, and making sure that you can get those latest fashions into your shops, onto your e-commerce websites at the earliest opportunity. So what they made sure they did was they looked at their supply chain design and actually made a tweak and a change to make sure they had in-house production and had more frequent deliveries to stores. So rather than just having it all outsourced, what they were able to do is to bring it back into house, to do more control and more management of themselves, and they managed to, as a net result, bring their lead times down to just 15 days versus previously months, which is what their competitors are doing. And as a net result of that, they saw high customer satisfaction and they saw full price sales within their stores. So they were able to churn and move their stock through at a lot quicker rate. So great example of how they were completely aligned and managed to redesign their centralized or create a centralized design strategy within the supply chain. Number 2 is Amazon. Big Amazon fan here. And one thing I love about Amazon is their customer service. So if you've ever got an issue, you can contact them and invariably they'll deal with you in a way that I'm really, really happy with. So if there's a single issue, they'll look to try and resolve the issue immediately. I never put the phone down or come off online thinking, well, that just didn't help. They always do their utmost to try and help you. So what was their business goal? It was to be the most customer-centric company on earth. Big statement. So what they did was then looked at things and said, well, how can we make sure that the customer experience is the best that we possibly can be? So from a supply chain perspective, they looked at it from obviously a fulfillment point of view. So let's create new fulfillment centers. Let's create as many fulfillment centers as we need to with our hub and spoke model across the world, not just in a particular country. They looked at predicted shipping as well. So where did they think the order from? So as a customer, what are the key areas, geographic areas around a country, around a town, around a city that people are going to be ordering from? And making sure we're proactive and we've got the relevant logistical functions that are in place are in those particular areas. And the real focus around logistics is always on that. And the most expensive bit is the last mile. So the last mile logistics. So how can we be creative? What new things can we bring on board? What they've done is they've brought a lot of their own drivers on board, put their own logistics functions in there. They've looked at unique ways of delivering into cities, using bike transport, using drones, all that kind of thing. So they're really looking at making sure they've got the right thing in the right place. And as a net result, we're getting fast, reliable delivery. And it's also industry-leading customer satisfaction and loyalty. So I know that if I go online now and try and order something from Amazon, if I'm a Prime member, at the very least, I'm going to get it next day. Possibly I can even get it same day as well. So as far as I'm concerned, from a customer perspective, that's fantastic. And if I do have an issue, and I do periodically, I know that I can call their call centre and get a resolution pretty quickly. Then in number 3 on the list here is Procter & Gamble, so P&G, and that's all around synchronizing demand and supply. So their business goal was to look at operational excellence and customer value. So look at that hand in hand. How can we constantly look to move forward and create and deliver and improve? So from an aligned supply chain, what they did is they did some real-time data sharing with retailers and suppliers. So how can we get that data moving from end to end at a fast pace, and then we can actually use that data to improve our operational excellence? So where is it that we're having some challenges? What's selling really quickly, and how can we look to get some resolutions to those to make sure that ultimately our product is on the shelf a lot quicker and at the levels that it needs to be. So as a net result, the improved shelf availability and reduced stock outs by 10 to 15%, which is massive, huge. So those are just 3 examples of if you've got supply chain aligned to your business objectives, you're going to drive success out through that. So it's having that great understanding. The next area I want to touch on of our 5 today, number 2, is data and using real-time data. Now, data is like gold dust. If we've got that data available to us and finding ways to capture that data is our first challenge. But once we've got a way of capturing that information, it's making sure that we use it and using it in the right way. And as the first slide says, it's using it in a real-time way. So when we've got that information, to making sure that we've got people or systems to process information to help us within our supply chains moving forward, to make sure we've got that full optimization. So the first thing there is around having that visibility and transparency. So making sure that we can provide instant insights across our supply chain. So from supplier status to customer delivery, so that full end-to-end. That will help us therefore manage any challenges or opportunities that pop up at the different points, the stage gates within our supply chains. So it should help us around potential disruptions. So again, I talked about geopolitical issues that could be happening due to weather conditions, due to issues that are going on within a particular country. So if we look at, for example, the issues that are going on with Ukraine and Russia at this moment in time, massive issues that are happening there. But if we know about it, we can react to it. So I was working with a client, and I was on a call with that particular client. And they weren't completely in sync with the meeting. You know, they were a little bit off. So I challenged them and said, are you okay? Is there anything going on? Because you don't seem completely focused within the meeting. And that's when issues were happening, and they had one of their factories, which was in Ukraine. And the net result of that was that they were told that within a couple of hours, the factory would be shut down. So because they were given that heads up, they had a fallback. They had an alternative option that was in Greece, and they were able to open or move across production to their Greece facility very, very quickly because they were given that heads up. We're aware of it. And there's lots of different bits of software out there that can help you about understanding these challenges that are coming on board further down the line. So you can get alerts that come through to give you that warning for you to be able to move your product to your or adapt to doing some compromises within your logistics. For example, if you are using the Far East or you're using the US in terms of, and you're a UK company, you're using different suppliers around the world, you can help them manage that through. A nice easy way to bring it. So that real-time data can help you work with the physical product that's in your warehouses. You're using a third-party warehouse to kind of manage your stock. Again, it's real-time data. You can go online to whatever system that you're using, ERP system, and you can see exactly what you've got, what potentially can be predicted to be an overstock, and what could be a stock out, and make those adjustments accordingly. So with the information, you can place your orders, you can move stock in from other places, and make sure that you've got you're not running out of stock, and you're not therefore having too much overstock. So in my days of working at IKEA, when we looked at our overstocking, or concrete as we called it in those days, we were able to move stock around between the branches. So if we knew another store was struggling with some stock, we could pick up the phone by using that real-time data and move the products through internal transfers. Just a simple, easy way of doing your inventory management. Demand forecasting. So we all put our forecast in theory in place. But how are we using that information? Is that just based on gut knowledge, or is it actually based on using real-time data? So let's look at the mapping. Let's look at why in the last few years a product may have gone up or down in terms of demand. So is it price sensitive? Was it not available, so therefore sales weren't where they should have been? Has something changed legally? Has something changed ethically that's going to mean that we need to change the forecasting and the ordering of those particular items? So using that data, using those data points, we can put that together within our various systems that we're using to create a nice, clean demand planning orders within our organization. We also to make sure we're looking at market trends. So has anything changed in that period of time through seasonality, maybe, through weather changes, maybe. We just need to be looking at those and making sure that we're using the right way. Logistical efficiency, we kind of touched on a little bit of this already, but using those data points. So what are you doing with your physical tags on product? So when you've got a product moving in, let's say from a supplier from the Far East to the UK, how do you manage that through? So are you getting data push points from your logistics suppliers that you're using in terms of where the shipments are? So where a container is, where a shipment arrives at a port, for example, are you getting those updates as it's coming through? But also when you're actually at the end-to-end delivery, so you're delivering, say, from your warehouse out to the end user customer or out to a distribution partner, are you factoring the data points that are available to you? So are you using any software that you would use on your vehicles to kind of manage that through in terms of time trackers and things like that? Also using things like mapping software, making sure that your mapping software is the most up-to-date that it can be, and you're actually using that to plan accordingly. I think the days are gone now where we're using delivery three strips of delivery notes and a pigeonholes to kind of work your deliveries out, use the information that's available to you, get the most effective and efficient time planning software you can get. And the last one in terms of having that a data point is the customer experience. So how is the customer finding that service? So is it being delivered on time? Is it being delivered in the right quality? Is it being delivered in one piece? So having that feedback in terms of how we can improve what we do. So it could be a change in delivery times. It could be a change in the packaging that we are using, whether that's more, whether it's less, whether it's to make it more ethically sourced. All those types of things are really, really important when it comes to data. There are some data gaps that are out there, which is down to organizations to have a look at to say, well, if we've got the resources, can we have a look into these data gaps? Data silos is a key point where we've not got connections between functions, we've not got connections between our suppliers or ultimately our end-to-end supply chain. So is there elements there that we can kind of pull that together? Having low data quality. So actually, is it real-time data that we've got, or is it outdated information? So if we're using information from a few years back, it may be 70% okay, but it isn't the best quality data that we could use. So what more could we do with that information? Having a talent shortage, and again, something that we'll touch on towards the end of today's session, is having a lack of skills within areas like supply chain that can help you in terms of pulling that data together. So why is it important to have that information, and what do we need our staff to be able to be trained up on to make sure they know the information, and the knock-on effect is if you're not using that information. So is it a case of knowledge and understanding whether that needs to be, or is it the skills on using or procuring that data? So is it the software knowledge that we need to have, the systems knowledge that we need to have? In terms of SMEs, particularly smaller SMEs, budget is dictating how much we can actually do. So there are limited options if you've got a limited budget. However, there are still data points that we can still gather at a minimal cost that's out there in the marketplace. And the last one, back to people, is that whole resistance to change. I'm sure many times you've looked to implement something within your business, but you've had a challenge where somebody said, we tried that and it didn't work. So it's breaking down those barriers and making sure that people understand what you're trying to do. So bring them on the journey with you, ask them to help you. So what thoughts and ideas have you got? This is why we're bringing this information in. This is going to make your life easier and ultimately make our business and our customers happier and make us more profitable as an organization. So 3 examples in terms of real-time data optimization, which I'll move through swiftly. Walmart is a great example. So forecasting product demand using things like the weather, especially with around seasonality. In my days of Sainsbury's, we would look at the weather a little bit further ahead to see if it was going to be warm weather. guess what? We need to get all the ice creams in. If it's colder weather, they aren't going to sell through. So it will help us with our demand planning. Also using social media and also sales data to look at those trends that are happening, which may make an effect. The impact on that was improved product availability during events like hurricanes or promotions. So you've got the social media promoting a particular product. We make sure we have it in stock. UPS using their route optimization software. So making sure that we're using it in the right way. So their Orion system, which is the on-road integrated optimization and navigation system. Yes, I'm standard for knowing that piece of information. They found by using that information, so understanding and mapping in the best routes based on history of data, based on what drivers have actually been telling them, based on traffic issues that they have on the road. They actually saved 10 million gallons of fuel and reduced 100 million delivery miles annually. So a great way of using their particular system. You may not have access to the Orion system because it's UPS, but what systems can you utilize? There's plenty of tracking systems out there that you can access. And the last one, number 3 on that list, is Unilever. So using predictive analytics in planning and manufacturing to forecast demand and reduce waste. Sorry. So their impact there was to cut down their inventory costs and improved customer service levels. So just using the analytics, using the information they've got to make sure they've got the most efficient and effective manufacturing processes based on demand. Very, very simple. Okay, so the next section I'm going to move on to there is around emerging technologies and how we can use that in our supply chain. So this is just one slide that I've got here, and just in summary, these are typically what we're seeing as areas that are actively being used today in terms of adoption, some that are kind of more medium levels and some that are kind of a lower levels at this moment in time. So the first one there is around AI and machine learning. So in terms of AI, I'm sure most people are using that on a daily basis, whether it's within their supply chain or not within their supply chain. You know, ChatGPT is a prime example of how you can use that within your business that is free of charge, or certainly the free option on there. But using machine learning of understanding about processes that you're doing within your business. So looking at, this is what we do, how can we make it do better? So using that technology to say, well, let's learn that process, and then let's have the systems then reprofile that and say, well, let's see if we can do it any better. So it's got a high adoption level on AI and machine learning, and that is only going to increase as we go forward. We've got a proven ROI, so it's a no-brainer, go for it. And typically we're seeing 10 to 20% in terms of savings by using and adopting that technology. So those error rates are being reduced at a dramatic rate at this moment in time, and it's kind of logical that says, you know, if you're using a system to do something, it's going to reduce that down. Second one on the list is around automation and robotics. So again, organizations now are starting to adopt this. Previously, it was due to its high cost, it wasn't adopted by the smaller types of businesses. It was very much the larger types of organizations. But these days, everyone, or a lot of organizations, are now looking at how we can automate stuff and bring robotics on board in lots of different types of ways. And whether it is just a simple repetitive process or whether it's using it in something far greater. In fact, Alex and I were just talking a little bit earlier on about bringing in robots into actual warehouses and using them like humans, but having them going through the same process at the same time. So I've seen on warehouse docks, for example, sort of 7 or 8 different robots doing the same task at the same rate, at the same pace. Guess what? There's no talking. There's no people dropping their performance rates. They're set at a level, set at a timeline, and they go and hit those levels every single time without failure. Switch them out to put them in charge, new battery on board, back and away they go. So you can operate 24/7. So robotics, proven, you know, 30 to 50% labor costs within an organization, and seeing those benefits coming through. So you're increasing profitability generally. You are making sure your quality levels are higher, and you can be repetitive around that, so you can increase your capacity and your opportunity within your organization. Doesn't necessarily mean you're making people redundant. It means you're putting those people into different roles in terms of the managing of those cobots, for example, or they are doing program design, things like that. So there's different things that people can do there. Third on the list, that is kind of at a medium adoption level, is the Internet of Things, and making sure that we're using data points, making sure that we're using things like RFID tags, or we're using temperature controls in vehicles, but we're using touch points that the internet can help us with to make sure that our business and our supply chains are improving. It's got really strong ROI potential. Obviously, if you can see monitors within your supply chain tracking things through, it's going to help you around things like lower spoilage, better visibility of seeing where a product could be within your supply chain. Fourth one on the list is around blockchain. That's kind of a medium level or low to medium level in terms of how you're using that information and the ROI potential. It's mixed at this moment in time. It's great around having that traceability and expense to scale. So essentially with blockchain, what you're doing is you're getting blocks of data and you're building on those data points to help you in terms of having, say, that ecosystem within your supply chain, that you're kind of building on that information and having that available to you. So things like security, things like within the medical industry, you can see that full traceability. If you want to know around where that product was actually originally sourced from, that information can be provided through those blocks within your blockchain. Next on the list, the sixth one on the list there is around digital twins. And simply with digital twins, what this allows you to do is to go into a situation where you can mimic and predict, or sorry, mimic and look to forecast what you could do. So you can, in a separate world, you can kind of say, well, if we go through these scenarios and make these changes or tweak this or implement this, what would it actually do to our operation? So would it look to improve things? Would it make things the same, or would it make things worse? So basically you can go into a sandbox type environment and see if you can improve your performance in your digital twin scenario. So that's at a medium adoption level, growing steadily when people actually understand the concept of it and have the systems and the processes and the technology to be able to do that. In terms of the last two on the list, the metaverse, even low adoption level and ROI is weak, simply because it's in its very, very early stages. So from a metaverse perspective, if you look at a scenario such as a warehouse, for example, and you're creating using headsets and things like that, is you can actually create a 3D world. And you can look at it and say, well, how does that actually look and feel? If we made these certain changes, how does that make it look and feel? What our warehouse would do? Is it more productive? Does the storage work as it should do? Is the racks too narrow together, for example? Have we got our full layouts throughout? Where would we store this, that, or the other? So you can use it from a virtual reality point of view to look at those certain elements of operation to see how it's actually working. And the last one there is around quantum computing and how we can use quantum within our supply chains. Very, very low adoption level at this moment in time. And from an ROI point of view, it is too early to tell. The concept around quantum computing is it's able to process more data far, far quicker. So you can throw in so many different data points and it will have a look at those data points and it will tell you the most efficient way of doing something, the most accurate way of doing something. It will look at your performance and things like that. The concept is fantastic and quantum will come, but at the moment still trying to crack the code of quantum computing. So we haven't actually got that available to us at this moment. But they are the technology that is out there in the marketplace that you can adopt. And you've got things there that are coming down the track and will be looking to directly affect in a positive way, if you're using it in the right way, your supply chains moving forward. So the next section I just want to move on is on risk management. And making sure our supply chains are as resilient as they possibly can do. So in terms of risk management, and particularly when we've looked at those particular issues that have happened in the world in terms of COVID-19, in terms of for the UK Brexit, when we're looking at geopolitical issues that are happening around the world, de-risking our supply chain is really important. Obviously, if we can reduce the risk, we can eliminate the risk, that's where we want to be. But by reducing that risk is fundamentally really, really important. So this is one of the most pressing topics in supply chain management today. So it says there, the post-pandemic era combined with the ongoing geopolitical volatility, and that is volatility, and that is not going to change, demands a complete rethinking of our risk management within within our organizations. So traditional cost-focused supply chains are given away to resilient first models that balance risk, agility, and cost efficiency. So I just put together a little slide here just in terms of seeing those changes. And this is what we've seen just in the last sort of 5 years. So traditionally, on the left-hand side there, you can see a pre-pandemic sort of old model. And what the COVID-19 situation actually did to us was to look at everything again and just go and really challenge and question, if this happens again, you know, a health challenge like that or something similar to that, how are we actually going to survive? Because a lot of businesses, if they didn't have a strong supply chain, actually collapsed during that period of time. For many, many reasons, just because they had too much risk within their supply chain, too much complexity, financially they just weren't in a good place, or from a stock point of view, they just didn't have the stock in the right place and available. So a lot of businesses just collapsed as a net result of that. So typically we've seen something called JIT, which is just-in-time fulfillment, that used to happen. You see this particularly within the automotive sector, where basically you're producing your item specifically for when the customer actually needs it. So that's actually translated now to be more of a just-in-case situation, or we have a hybrid version of both. So it's not just a case of producing as and when is requested, it's having a little bit of reserve stock within reason, but also actually, you know, predicting actually when people are going to need that more in the future. The second one down there is around lean and globalized sourcing, now changing that to being multi-sourcing and nearshoring and localization. So one of my organizations that I worked for decided that they wanted to bring everything back in-house. So where possible, they pulled stuff from the Far East and had it made in Britain. Yes, it was more expensive. However, what they were able to do was to improve in terms of their lead times. Specifically, they could guarantee the quality that was coming out, and they could do that made in Britain stamp that attached to it. So lots and lots of businesses are trying to bring things back closer to the UK. Minimum buffers or redundancy, we're now moving to scenario planning and those digital twins that I talked about before. So rather than having just a small amount of stock, we're looking at a particular scenario that could be coming. So again, that could be based on customer demand, based on trends, based on seasonality, and then being able to use, say, that digital twin operation. So the opportunity to start doing that sandbox exercise of saying, okay, if we make these adjustments and changes, what's that going to do for us? And then the final one there is around risk. So typically around risk, it's low probability and isolated events. So we thought that was going to be almost one-off scenarios. But now we're saying, right, well, let's embrace risk. So we're going to have constant development and changes. There's going to be, we know that's going to be multi-dimensional. So we're going to have issues around climate, cyber, potential and health. Just touching on cyber there. As we're all aware, within organisations, Marks and Spencers, we've just had an issue where they've been cyber hacked, and it has that massive knock-on effect. So rather than just turning a blind eye to it, acknowledge it and go, okay, what are the what-if scenarios? So if that happens, what are we going to do from a business continuity point of view? Where's our risk strategy that we have around there? So actually embracing risk, it's going to happen. What are we going to do about it? Is critical in our supply chains moving forward. Then the last section I just want to touch on today, and I'll bring Alex back in very shortly, is just around making sure that we have the right people within our organisations to support us moving forward. Depending on the size of your organisation, depends on whether you actually call them a supply chain person or whether you've got them embraced under a different name, but they have supply chain responsibilities. But we've identified that in our terms of our supply chains, they are complex. They're going more digital. And typically they are global. So making sure that our supply chain managers typically can embrace, adjust, and help affect that is what we need within our organizations. So we've identified some key skills, some leadership traits, and some talent strategies to make sure that we've got those supply chain individuals coming through our businesses, or we can recruit them into our businesses. So in terms of those traits, what are we looking for? So if you're supply chain operators that are on the call today, then these skills will probably ring out true that this sits in your armory today. But as we've talked through in the previous slides, having somebody that who is data savvy, so they can actually understand the numbers, embrace that. Anything that I do involves a spreadsheet generally at home. My wife laughed at me for doing it, but I process data that way. That's the way I do it from home. But having those data analytics will help you, and embracing AI, to make better informed decisions within your business. Making your strategic collaborators, so working across those functions. So I see very much as supply chain as being the heart. It joins all the dots up. So being able to work across those different areas with different business units, and also geographies as well, whether that's through a supplier in a different country, or whether that's perhaps other factories that you've got within your organization across different countries. Being tech literate, so making sure that you embrace those digital changes. So all the technology that we talked about that is available and coming down the track, don't be frightened of it. Embrace it, understand it, learn it, and bring it into your businesses. I think the most critical one is to be agile and resilient. Forget about this is what we've always done. You need to make sure that you're going to affect and adjust to the climate and the geopolitical issues that are going out there. Handle that disruption that always happens within supply chains. And then lastly, being purpose-driven. So what are we actually trying to do as a leader? What are we trying to do to take our organization forward? And an element of that could be around ESG, so environmental social governance. So what are our standards that we're trying to achieve within an organization, and making sure that we take everybody on that journey. So when we talk about having a product that's ethically sourced, make sure you can back that up. And there should be a reason as to why you're doing it, not just because it's the right thing, but it's what your industry is probably expecting and what your customer is expecting ultimately. So making sure you embrace that and drive that through your organization is really important. So that's the end of sort of my element of the slide deck in terms of talking through those particular focus areas. I'm going to hand back now to Alex, who's going to talk about Supply Chain Academy and how we can help you on that journey.
That's great. Thank you, Jamie. I think you should have a round of applause, really, because that was a fantastic presentation. You've touched on so many fantastic kind of elements there, all relevant, all very much of interest, and obviously, you know, big issues and opportunities in the supply chain. It's interesting though. I mean, I wrote an article on robotics coming into supply chain maybe 8-9 years ago, and we're starting to see that. And you and I are actually meeting a robotics company next week to talk and understand how that robotics kind of piece would work more effectively in the warehouse or in logistics. So that's to be really, really interesting. And you talked about quantum computing as well. I actually happen to be I have worked with some of IBM for starters, who've created the quantum computer, and it is definitely coming into play, particularly around managing data for supply chain professionals. So more on that kind of later as well. But from a supply chain academy point of view, we are very passionate about delivering education that's of high quality. We deliver all kinds of short courses and advisory kind of services on all of the elements that Jamie has discussed and mentioned today. And utilizing your apprenticeship levy is also an offer and definitely worth kind of considering, because companies in the UK have to pay that tax. You can educate your people at an early career stage, or for existing employees, they're able to gain a piece of paper that they might not have thought they could in their lives, which is a wonderful thing to do. So from a supply chain kind of practitioner point of view, you know, we deliver a fantastic program which looks at the end-to-end supply chain, covering all of the elements again that Jamie has kind of discussed and kind of gone through. But more importantly, it helps people understand how their role impacts their business, but also how their role affects the supply chain upstream and downstream. And my personal favorite part of it is the continual improvement part, looking at lean principles, project management, managing projects, understanding compliance as part of that program as well. So these are on offer. So utilizing your apprenticeship levy, you're able to kind of use that tax for these apprenticeship programs or for existing staff or for early careers, as I say. And we've also got a supply chain degree apprenticeship, a supply chain degree. Now we were Supply Chain Academy were the trailblazer group leaders in putting this standard together, which all the universities in the UK have to adhere to. We spend a good amount of time producing that standard, working with around 200 employers. So it is a standard that most employers agree with and understand. It covers all of the lovely supply chain activities, as you can see on that page. And you know, you're able to gain a degree, but uniquely, assessment is based upon how you apply the learning to specific work projects. So you're guaranteed to see a return on investment or an improvement in a process, or maybe utilizing some of what Jamie has kind of discussed around robotics or AI as part of those projects in the workplace, making it ever more relevant for you and your organization. And that's my part. On the next slide, Jamie, if you could put on the next slide for us, you'll have our contact details there. And you know, it's an opportunity to kind of learn more. Now, we've got a couple of questions that we're going to kind of go to the audience for, but I've also got a couple of questions that I'm going to ask Jamie as well. So I'm going to kick off, and then that'll give you a bit of time just for you guys to ask your questions. And if you don't ask questions, I will pick on someone as well. So my first question to Jamie is, I really am a big fan of S&OP, sales and operational planning, and aligning supply and demand. So for Jamie, what role does S&OP play in balancing supply and demand more effectively in any organization? And can you talk about it from a larger organization point of view and also from a smaller organization perspective as well?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Good question. And fundamentally, the sales and operational planning is the validity that supply chain needs to have for its function, to make sure that what it's doing is the right thing and creating that profitability for an organization. So what we're looking for is from a large, well, for any organization, is to make sure that we are streamlined as we possibly can be, delivering what is required. But where we have seen previously, and this is why I referenced slightly earlier in the slides about it only coming to supply chain only coming to prominence in kind of like the 1980s or the 1990s, is it wasn't seen as an important partner with an organization. So making sure from a strategic point of view, you have a seat at the top table, that you are being listened to, and you are adapting and working with your other divisional partners, as it were, or your board partners, to make sure you deliver accordingly. So what happens is strategically you agree whatever your operational metrics, your costs are going to be, and then ultimately what you're then doing is making sure you deliver against those and reflecting on those performance results and adapting accordingly. So your supply chain is a great way that you can make savings within your business. Equally, if it's run poorly, it's a great way to increase your costs and cause your organization more issues. So the benefits are making sure that you've got a close partnership with your partners within any organization. You're reducing costs, you're increasing efficiency, profitability, reducing risk, as we kind of talked about, and making sure you've got that continuous improvement cycle that's happening within the business. So it's critical to make sure that we're paying back to an organization. Oh, Alex, you're just on mute there.
Typical. No, that's fantastic. Great answer, and totally agree with your comments there as well. Do people from the audience have a question for Jamie at all? Not at this time? Maybe I think you've given so much information, Jamie, that it's covering all of the bases, right?
Let's hope so. I'm not bored everyone to tears and they've gone to sleep.
I'm sure they haven't. I'm sure they haven't. So my question then, it's all about the great kind of presentation that you've given, is talking about how important KPIs are as part of supply chains, and how you apply that with becoming more agile and flexible in delivering products through the supply chain.
Okay, so in terms of any organization, KPIs are critical. Having those metrics within your business to manage ultimately what does success look like, what does failure look like. As operational people, we are motivated by results ultimately. So we need to see how we are actually performing within an organization. So those KPIs are driven by a number of different reasons, because it's a financial number that the organization is looking to hit. It is our customer satisfaction levels. There are a number of different levels that we have. And what we can do is we can break that down by different business units. We can break it down by different departments within an organization to function. So if we've got those KPIs in place, again, we can see what success looks like. So we can see the numbers that we are actually hitting, and we can adjust accordingly if we are above or below those particular numbers. Clearly, we want to be making sure that we're hitting those KPIs to be successful across our organization, to make sure that everything is moving smoothly and nicely. We can actually penalize ourselves by overachieving as well. So what we don't want to be doing is hitting and overachieving our levels too high. That means we're holding too much stock, which is why our OTIF result is so high, or having so much stock that that we are struggling from an efficiency of moving that stock around, so it has a knock-on effect with another KPI. So having those KPIs is critical to keeping your supply chain, keeping your organization on track and delivering success within an organization.
That's great, and that leads me to my there is a flow, and the reason why we do this is the collaboration or cross-functional collaboration across a business, and also with their tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers as well, and further. Any advice for how organizations can collaborate more across different departments?
Yeah, so I think the key thing there is understanding stakeholders. So who are your stakeholders you're actually kind of working with, and whether that's internally or whether it's externally. And when I say externally, that could be externally outside your physical building that you're kind of working in, but it's also your suppliers, it's your customers as well. And making sure that you understand actually what is the need. So what are you actually trying to deliver? And get that feedback. So from a customer perspective, it's not what you think the customer needs, it's actually what the customer wants from you. And the same applies for your suppliers. If you talk to your suppliers and make sure they understand what you're needing from them, and having regular communication touch points. So it's not a case of we set a contract up on day 1 of year 1, and then we don't revisit them until the end of the contract, if it's been a 3-year contract, and then say you did a really poor job. As you've been going along, you should be having regular touch points, that open communication, sharing information, sharing data, which will make sure that collaboration, efficiency improvements, all those types of beautiful things that become a great supply chain can actually happen by having that great collaboration within your organization, but also outside of your organization.
That's great. And also from a cybersecurity point of view, having more collaboration and helping them understand the implications, especially part of the supply chain, which M&S has seen, and so the co-op recently, is ever more important, and definitely worth exploring for our next webinar. So with that in mind, thank you so much. We're just coming up to time now. So if there's any questions, please would you raise your hand or ask Jamie a question? Okay, if there's no questions, then I will say thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. We'll be having our second webinar fairly soon, and we'll send out more details for that as well. This is part of a series of 3, and we will be having some ad hoc webinars as well. So on one of our ad hoc ones, we have a military general from the US joining us to look at cybersecurity as a battlefield and supply chain as a battlefield, and how that kind of collaborates and how that affects businesses as well. And looking at what military people think about from a risk perspective. So something a little bit different, a little bit more focused on kind of getting things done and being successful. But on that note, I'd like to thank Jamie so much for his time on giving such a great presentation. I'd like to thank Paul for being a fantastic producer. And with that in mind, I wish you all well. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you.